Hey guys, I'm going to show you how to do a common whipping, which is the technique that I use to close all the ends of my ropes, climbing or otherwise. I'm going to split this into 3 videos. So the first component is the Marlinspike Hitch, which we use for tightening the frapping turns around the whipping and for pulling the bite through at the end. The slip constrictor knot is part 2. It is a variation on Ashley Book of Knots number 1188, which gives us a quick release to pull off and untie the constrictor knot after we're done with it. And the constrictor knot is just used as a binding knot to pinch off the end of the rope while we're making the whipping. And we can also use 2 constrictor knots side by side with a gap in the middle to make it easier for us to cut right through the rope to get rid of the excess on the end. And then part 3 will be the actual process of tying the whipping. So this is my Excel racing control line that I got recently, and the first thing I did was to tie a whipping on both ends, as you can see here. And when I cut this into smaller segments for my friction hitches and whatnot, I'll be doing the same thing to secure the ends. As you probably already know, because this is a heat-resistant type of cord, you can't melt the ends on it. So this is a great thing to know if you're working, if you need to seal the end of a rope that can't be treated that way. Generally speaking, melting the end of a rope to seal it, I have nothing against that, by the way, and some of the ropes that I have are sealed that way. There's no question it's easier. But in general, if you can avoid sealing the end of a rope that way, it's good, because there is actually a safety element to that. I've heard horror stories about rigging on ships and whatnot where there's a cord that's been burned and melted on the end like that, and because there's a sharp corner or edge on that melted burr, when it gets pulled through somebody's hands in an emergency or something unexpected happens, I've heard of that dragging through somebody's hand and cutting the tendons all the way across. So a whipping on the end of a rope is actually a safety feature. It's safer to have a whipping than it is to burn the end of a rope. Having said that, I don't think there's too many applications in climbing that that would make it forbidden, but I just think it's a great way to finish the end of a rope. In general, it looks nicer. It has a lower profile than burning on an electrical adhesive on the end. I got nothing against that either, but I just happen to find this a more elegant and practical way to secure the end of a line. And it's not too difficult once you understand how to do it. I'm going to do the demonstration on a piece of wooden dowel because I think it will be almost impossible for me to show you on an actual small diameter rope to do the whipping and not obscure what I'm doing with my fingers while I do it. So I'm going to do it in a larger scale with paracord so that you can see more clearly what I'm doing. And I would encourage you to practice this the same way before you try it on a rope. It gets a little bit trickier when you're doing it on the rope because it's a smaller diameter. You're using twine, which is smaller as well. But once you've practiced it a few times on a larger scale like this, you'll have a better understanding of what you're doing, and it'll be less frustrating for you when you switch to actually putting a whipping on a piece of cord or climbing rope. So I just tied a constrictor knot on here. I'll get into constrictor knots in part 2. So the Marlinspike Hitch, which is the subject for this video, is just a knot used to temporarily tie into a piece of line so that you can reef on it and tighten it. So back in the olden days of the tall ships, every sailor had at least 2 tools on their belt at all times, and it was a rigging knife and a marlinspike. So a marlinspike is just a steel spike. Sometimes there's a lanyard hole in the end. Most of the time there wasn't, and a tip on the other side. And it's just used for prying apart knots, for separating the strands of 3-strand rope, for splicing, and it's also used for a specific hitch that's used for tightening rope work. So in those days there was a protocol, you might say, about how to tighten permanent rigging. Permanent rigging they call standing rigging, and it's just the aspects of the rope work and the rigging on the ship that doesn't get swapped out frequently. It's the part that just stays as it is. So when you're doing permanent rigging, standing rigging, the protocol is that it has to be Marlinspike tight, not hand tight. Just pulling it tight as you can with your fingers is not good enough in those applications, so it has to be Marlinspike tight. So this is how you make something Marlinspike tight. Before I go any further, in case you're thinking, well, what the hell am I going to do? I don't have a Marlinspike. The nice thing about a Marlinspike is it can be literally anything. If you don't have a Marlinspike, you can use a screwdriver, you can use a piece of wooden dowel, as long as it's thick enough that it's not going to break, because we are going to be reefing on it really hard. It could be anything that's just really strong and cylindrical and comfortable enough that you can hold it in your hand to tighten something. I've even made Marlinspike hitches big enough to put my foot through it and use that to tighten up a piece of cordage. So, the Marlinspike hitch. I like to set it up with my fingers. Some people, when they get good at it, can just use the actual Marlinspike. So we're just gonna grab the cord. We're gonna make an overhand loop, so the working end is on my side, not on the underside. So overhand loop, and then just take that loop and push it up and forward over top of the standing line, and then we're going to reach in and grab that standing end of the rope. Tighten it up, and now it's tightened down on the Marlinspike, and the way you want to reef on it is to kind of slide it to the middle of your Marlinspike or your screwdriver and put at least one finger on this side and pull it. I like to pull it laterally. For safety reasons, don't tighten anything with a Marlinspike pulling towards you, because if the cord snaps, you could get the Marlinspike in the face. So for safety reasons, I like to always tighten things, and I also find it ergonomically better to tighten things laterally, like shoulder to shoulder kind of thing, like that. And hold the cylinder or the climbing rope or whatever it is that you're tying around, hold it the same way that you're holding the Marlinspike. And that also holds the tension in whatever you're tightening as well by gripping down on it like that. And that's how you reef on it. And then nice thing about the Marlinspike hitch is as soon as you pull the spike out, the knot just unravels. So that's the Marlinspike hitch. You can use it in conjunction with another one on the other side if you want. So here's my Marlinspike on this side, and I'll tie another Marlinspike hitch on the other side, and now I have two that I can reef on and really tighten that down. So now this particular constrictor knot is what a sailor would refer to as spike tight, Marlinspike tight. I'll get into constrictor knots in the next one. And just another quick fun fact I just have to throw in here. You might think a marlin fish, you might think that this is named after them because of their sharp point on their nose, but it's actually the other way around. The fish was named after this tool because sailors thought that the noses on those fish that jump out of the water look like the tool that they have in their pocket. And that concludes part one, and I'll see you in part two, how to tie the constrictor knot.